Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström, the author of several sewing books, including Sewing Jeans and Fit for Knits, and I also do sewing courses. I have an upcoming course about how to sew jeans, and I also run a pattern line under the brand name The Last Stitch.
My name is Malena Hjerpe, and I work as a pattern maker, a freelance pattern maker, and I also do my own PDF patterns under the name Hazelhen Patterns.
And we have asked you listeners for questions, and boy did we get lots of questions for this episode. We're so excited. Keep them coming. I was thrilled to see all the questions because we love answering this stuff, and it also, forces us to think about specific things that we might not consider otherwise. So it's very, very, very helpful to get questions from you. So we're going to do a Q&A episode, right, Malena?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to try to answer your questions, as many as we can possibly fit into the normal length of an episode, which is pretty long. But if we're not able to cover all the questions, we're definitely going to do a follow-up episode, right?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, we've got a lot of questions. It's so much fun, and just keep them coming. We have now set up a new system that we write them down all in the same document, so we got them all gathered, and we will be able to do a future episode very easily then. So feels good to have it in a proper system for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you wonder where do I ask the questions, well, you can either do it on our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, or on our YouTube channel in the comment section, Stitching Tales Pod, or you can also email us at stitchingtalespod@gmail.com. And all this information will be in the show notes of this episode.
Definitely. But should we get started? Do you want to take the first question?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this question is from Andrea Lind, and I'm going to translate this because it is in Swedish, which is about sewing jeans. She wants to know some suggestions on proper good fabric to make the pocket on jeans, because similar to the ones that you buy in professional made jeans, and that can be a little bit tricky. And also Andrea says, thank you for a super nice pod. Thank you so much, Andrea. And yeah, I have lots of suggestions on this particular topic because as I like to nerd on fabric. So the thing is that when you get jeans in that are store-bought, it usually has a mix of cotton and polyester, and the reason why it's nice to have some polyester in the pocket lining fabric is that it's much more durable, because if you do get pure cotton, if you put a lot of keys and stuff like that into your pockets, and it's chafes on your body and washing, it's going to wear down a little bit. So my absolute favorite fabric to look for, which is very similar to what you find in good quality jeans, is unbleached cotton poly twill. So I'm going to just pull it up here if you have the video version, if you watch the video version. But this is, so it's not poplin, it's twill. So you have that diagonal twill weave, and this is incredibly durable. And I think it's not going to be too difficult to find. I found it locally here in a store here in Gothenburg, where I live, and it has the right amount of thickness, so it doesn't show through too much. And I have used this particular fabric on jeans for many years now, and while some of the jeans have shredded to pieces, the pocket lining has stayed intact. So even though the inside of the legs of the jeans is like has disappeared, so that chafing that has, but the pocket lining, that still works. So
do you know the composition then between the cotton and polyester?
I think it's a 60-40 mix, 60 cotton and 40 polyester, but somewhere around that. So that's my number one suggestion. And my second suggestion, if you definitely want to maybe recycle or reuse something that you might have previously, is to use poplin shirting, which is usually also a mix. I think it's usually about 40-50% each, right, as well, Malena, with polyester and cotton. When you get like shirting poplin, you usually the good idea about having the mix is that the polyester makes it wrinkle free, basically. So when you wash it, it will not wrinkle, and of course again it's more durable. I mean, obviously I'm a huge massive fan of having pure natural fibers in most cases, and it's much sustainable, it's more biodegradable. But however, sometimes synthetic has its place in fabrics, and we also have to think about sustainability in terms of how well a garment holds up over time. It's not just the composition itself, it's also investing in good quality fabric. So I'm going to hold up a pair of jeans here if you're watching the video version. And you can see also in the waistband, it's actually lined, both the pocket and the waistband on the inside is lined with an old men's shirt using this particular cotton poly mix. So this is also really, it's a blue, white, squared, so it adds such a nice detail. And again, I have not had issues with this fabric getting shredded, despite the fact that I've used second-hand shirting, so they were already worn when I just cut the pieces together. So if you want to have some fun lining rather than the unbleached one, definitely look for good quality cotton shirting, either buy new fabric or see if maybe you have some in your stash. Maybe sometimes shirts can get like in the elbows, they can get a bit worn down, and and the elbows and the underneath the arms, it's going to be, that's probably the areas where sometimes the shirting doesn't hold, the shirt doesn't hold up, but you have lots of fabric on the body, and that's enough to use for pocket lining. So those are my main suggestions. Yeah. So in this case, it's probably better to use some synthetics. That's my number one tip. And
it's always a little bit sad when you go with the synthetics option, but as you say, it is for a reason. It is so much more durable, and especially in this case when it's pockets, since they are under a lot of stress. When you have keys and things in your pockets and you put your hands down, and it's a little bit sad that synthetics it's preferable to use, but it's true. And it's a little bit unfortunate because when you recycle material, mixes of fabrics are the most difficult thing to reuse or extract the fibers from it, since it is here a mix of cotton and polyester. But as you say, for me, to making the product as best as it can be, to make that life of the product as long as possible so you don't have to produce more stuff, I think that wins for me. I mean, just with my logical thinking, that's what we should aim for, to have as long living garments as possible. So a mix of cotton polyester is the go-to here.
Yeah, I agree. And also, and as we are no expert on sustainability, either of us, but it's definitely something we think about and something we have to consider. And it's always a trade-off, I think. And the good part here is, as I said, there is opportunities to reuse all the garments in order.
That's a perfect use. Yeah.
So and also compared to a lot of other stuff, the amount of fabric that is required to create a couple of pockets on a pair of pants or a pair of jeans, it's minimum compared to a lot of other things. So yeah, but as you bring out a very good point there, Malena, about the recycling, because more and more initiatives, at least here in Sweden, they're for recycling textiles, but unfortunately most ready-to-wear garments have a mix. Today.
And usually when the fashion brands recycle garments, it's 3% that becomes new garments. It's actually used a lot more in stuffing for car seats and those kind of things. It's not usual at all to do new garments of them. Hopefully that will change in the future, but as it is for now, it's not really 3%. That's basically nothing.
That's very interesting stuff. I had no idea, and thank you for sharing that, because it brings some perspective on it, so it's easy to make assumption as a consumer, and that's a reality check for sure. Yeah definitely. All right then, Malena, do you want to go on to the next question?
Yes, we got a question here. I sewed a Vida pants sample with stretch. No, sorry. You sewed a Vida pants sample with stretch thread, I think. Wondering how they helped up.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, because we talked about this for context here. Vida pants is my latest sewing pattern that you can check out. It's it's a dressier pants pattern, but it's made for knit fabrics. And I had some sample of stretch thread, which is basically a regular sewing machine thread that has some stretch, which I think is an interesting option if you don't have a serger, or if you want to use a straight stitched on knits, because there's a big risk otherwise that when you pull the fabric, because of the stretch nature, that the seam will pop. So what I did that you are referring to is that I sewed the darts using a pretty... normally when I sew darts on it, I use a narrow zigzag stitch. So there's a little bit built down in stretch, and I also, of course, shorten the stitch length, again, because you need that stretch. But this time I think I sewed pretty much a straight stitch. I just like a smidge of width added, just a tiny, because I'm neurotic that way, like because I have so much bad stories about sewing.
You have
with
some
straight
trust
stitch
issues still with
yes,
it.
I have some trust issues. Yes, I have not been proven wrong. It's a very yeah. I'm an anxious sewer. And it's so annoying because Anyways.
Hey, I got my issues as well, so I don't judge.
Yeah. This is a safe space for us neurotic people that also are sewing. Anyways, but to answer your questions, which I think is a very good one, yes, so far the darts that I sewed using a more straighter stitch than I would normally do if I use regular sewing thread has held up really well. So I think I would say that so far so good, and I will definitely keep on using the thread more. And when I have more time and I'm finished my jeans course and all the other things I want to do in my life, so that's probably going to me basically say it's going to take a while. But I definitely want to do a blog post or maybe a YouTube video or a combination of both, where I really dive deep into this thread and do more like systematic tests and everything. I think that could be super helpful for anyone who is looking for a good option when you have a regular sewing machine. I think it's a very interesting product, and I think it definitely has some potential, future potential, definitely.
Yeah, and we talked about this before. You used for the side seam and like the crotch, and then you used a regular overlock, or?
No, yeah. I used a combination. So for all the, when I sewed the pockets and everything, I also used a straight thread for everything that was straight seam. But I didn't sew the entire pants. But the darts and the pocket area is kind of high stretch. I mean, they are very under more stress, basically. So those areas should be popping normally, and so far they haven't done it.
That sounds good, interesting. I will definitely do that in the future as well. And top stitching, like around necklines, if you don't have a cover lock where you can have the chain stitch, I mean, then elastic thread will be excellent, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. So I'm definitely keen on doing that, because what I haven't done yet then is that I haven't done like a horizontal top stitching, because that's the most risky thing. I mean, if you ever try to do that on a t-shirt on a regular sewing machine, sooner or later, the pop, you have two problems basically. First of all, you lose all stretch because it's a straight stitch, and secondly, with time, there's a huge risk that the straight stitch will pop in one place or another, because obviously it's going to be stretched out a lot crosswise or the width. So that's going to be like the main test. So I haven't done that yet, and also because the VD pants is a slightly more loose fitting style, I'm not sure how well it would be if it was like a super tight leggings, for instance, if it would be just as well. So again, so far so good, but do your own sample as well. Don't trust me.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to hear if you have any listeners who have any other experience with it. We would love to hear it. Just leave us a comment, and we'll bring it up in a future episode, because that would be so interesting to hear. I love when these changes happens, like updates, new developments in the industry. It's so fun to see them.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. Especially, I mean, we both love sewing with knits, and it's definitely something that's here to stay. So it's so nice to see that there are more and more products. And maybe I've mentioned it earlier on, but Mettler is the brand that I have the stretch thread from. And if you have any other brand recommendations, again, as Malena says, do share it on our platforms if you have any experience as well, because we are definitely, it's a wonderful thing to share for sure.
So do you want
Awesome.
to take a next question?
Yes, I will. Let me see here. How do I fix a mock turtleneck that stretches out over time? Remove and resew. Malena, I'm gonna...
My pet peeve in when it comes to knitted garments is necklines that stretches out, or doesn't have like the seams or the fabric, like they are not stretching equally. It's just it gives me the shiver.
I think we came on to neurosis here. One of your icks.
Yeah, but that's a thing I always checked when I was a pattern maker. Like when I did all the sample handling, I always check like the seams, like, you know, pull them. Is it nice? And when like especially the bottom hem on a, I don't know, t-shirt, whatever, when the seam is too thick and you feel like, oh, this will crack if I pull it a little bit more, that's just like, I hate those kind of things. But yeah, if the fabric already has been stretched out, I mean, you can cut it away, reduce a little bit, sew it on again. Would not maybe really recommend it. Here, I think the key is to have, if it's a rib fabric, for example, or use a fabric that has good stretch, because it needs to be stretched out when it's sewn on, otherwise it's just gonna stand up if it doesn't have any stretch, because it needs to be smaller compared to the neckline, and that the fabric, it has to have, again, a combination of, if it is cotton, and then some lycra spandex, elastan, something that helps the recovery, because if it is 100% cotton, it will grow. Maybe not the first few washes, but after like several washes, it will grow, unfortunately. But that's a spandex or elastan, whatever it's called, that will help with the recovery. And this you can check it already on the fabric stage, that when you pull it, it should recover to like the same length again, like it should be 100% again after you pull it out. And if it doesn't, if it starts to become a little bit wavy, bubbly, then you know that it doesn't have that good recovery, so then it's not really suitable for the neckline, unfortunately. So here, I would cut away and sew on a new. It's a little bit unfortunate if then you might have contrasting fabrics, colors, like that it's not really matching, but it is a little bit tricky situation. And I would, if you start to like unpick, if it's an overlock seam, it will just be stretched out even further, so I would just cut away the overlock seam and sew it back on a new fabric. What would you do, Johanna?
I would do the same thing, and as Malena says, I think the number one thing here is getting the material right to begin with, and doing the stretch test is very, very telling for sure. And I think you brought up you covered pretty much everything, Malena. So I was going to reinforce the fact also that unpicking the neckline, it's going to unfortunately become a little bit stretched out as well, because of the nature of the fabric. Unless the fabric has great recovery and it's very supple, you will get an like slightly stretched out uneven neckline. So you bring out a really good point here. You probably need to trim away more fabric, at least the seam allowance, and sometimes a little bit more even, just to ensure that when you start sewing again, because you can definitely pull back the fabric a bit with the stretch of the rib or the ribbing fabric, but that's definitely a risk that you run into. And also, I also advise against unpicking, because if you use delicate knits, you run a huge risk of actually cutting into the loops of the fabric, and it's going to unravel, because it's very easy to do that, and it's quite hard to rip knits in my experience, unfortunately, especially when you have these sturdy overlock seams. So you can pull threads and everything like that, but you take a big risk, unfortunately.
And it's a little bit funny with knit fabric. It's like, yeah, if you get a hole in it, yeah, it will unravel like when you wear it and wash it. Yeah, but leave the edges raw. That's no problem. You don't need to overlock them. It's like, wait, what? It's like so contradicting. But yeah, it is a little bit the nature of the fabric.
Yeah,
but I never leave my edges raw, just to be clear, because of that risk.
Yeah. Yeah, it is definitely tricky to navigate. I mean, knits is it's both easy to sew and incredibly hard to get your head around, and that's why we love to talk about this, and we've written a book about it as well, because it's a very different type of fabric, and again also so many different type of fabrics to wrap your head around. And it's usually, knits is definitely one of those things, if you have to get it right from the start. If something goes wrong, unfortunately, unless you're doing like working with sweatshirt fabric or something like that, it's going to be tricky to salvage it. I mean, when you work with wovens, you can basically just rip and resew, but every time you do that with a stretch fabric, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a demanding fabric, let's put it like that. Yeah,
I hope that we didn't sound too negative here, but I guess it's a good learning lesson. Also, again, check if you have this issue with ready-to-wear garment as well. I mean, definitely check that stuff. I mean, you can definitely pull and feel the quality, I think, on good quality ribbing on a t-shirt versus a bad. I think you can even notice that just holding the fabric or the garment in the store. So I think that's also a way of not running into this risk when you're buying something that you have no idea how they had done the quality assurance, because as you say, Malena, you as professionals, you have your way of asserting this, but I have many store-bought t-shirt that has the neckline has expanded and it kind of stands right out, and it's wavy and everything like that. So there's definitely not a guarantee just because it's made from an industrial setting that the ribbing will hold up.
No, definitely. No, I have so many garments as well that it has been it's growing. It loses its recovery after you wash it a few times, and it's such an unfortunate thing, because the rest of the garment is fine. It's just a neckline that is not looking nice.
Yeah. All right, then. Should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, we got a question for you here, Johanna. Your other career is not sewing related. What started your sewing career?
Oh,
yeah. And first, what is your real career?
Yeah, okay,
using air quotes here.
What do you, Hannah? What do I do when I don't speak into this pod and write sewing books? Well, it's a long story because I'm an older person. But first of all, what I do for a living. I work as a communication officer. I think the formal. I work in communication basically. I have a background as a journalist, and I worked a lot in print and digital media for about 15 years. And before that, I was a librarian. Just for a couple of years. So that's my professional background, which has been super helpful for doing what I do now, which is doing books and doing design and taking photos and everything like that, because I've learned that in my various day jobs, and I do social media and all the stuff as well in my day job. And for my sewing career, well, that's a long story as well. I began sewing when I was 11, and I wanted to. When I was around 20, I was definitely very drawn to becoming a fashion designer, and I even applied for one of those prep schools, and I didn't get in. So that kind of dampened my dreams a little bit, and then I studied to be a librarian, and then I seriously considered, because I was unemployed for a bit there after I finished my degree, again seriously considered going into fashion, because then I moved to Gothenburg. They had more fashion schools. So again, I was seriously considering that, but then I got a job as a librarian, so I kind of let that dream slide. And that was in 97. And then I kind of had that dream simmering, and I kept on sewing most of my clothes, which I've done pretty much through all my life, basically for 40 years now. And then I was very early adapter of the sewing internet. So I started to post things and connect in different groups and stuff like that around 2003, I think. Pattern Review, Flickr, And then the blog started to pop up in 2005, I think. There were lots of sewing blogs on Blogger and WordPress. And I definitely wanted to start blogging, but so I was also a little bit unsure because I was working as a journalist then, because I was writing so much content on my like day job. So I was thinking maybe I would end up overextending myself. And also I was a little bit scared to take the fun out of sewing, which is definitely always a risk when you do this for a full-time living, or at least a part-time living. But I finally bit the bullet in 2008 and started my blog. And it's kept the same name, The Last Stitch, the entire time. Don't remember how I found that name, and I wanted to change it so many times, but I mean it's just a name, and it just kept me going. And every time I said some other suggestions to people, they were like, no, but The Last Stitch is good. So yeah, I just kept it. And then because I had some plans then, I've always done side projects outside my day job. I've written books about how to use the internet, and I've done like courses on how to search the internet, which you had to teach people in the 90s. And so I had a lot of I've always had an entrepreneurial soul, I think. I always had some kind of side gig outside my day job. So I decided to, in 2009, because then Etsy had become quite big, so I decided to I launched a small garment fashion line that I sold on Etsy, made to order, very small runs, and it was somewhat sustainable. I think I got a pretty good amount of orders, so it was kind of stressful at times, but it wasn't like overwhelming. But I definitely knew long term that making garments for pay is not my thing, because I definitely want to be more in the creative side. And several people told me back then, why don't you release these garments as sewing patterns instead? Because I was doing knits back then as well, knit garments. That's the only thing I sold. Just like I've maybe had one woman, I think, design. It was blouses and knits and skirts and sweaters.
Do you have pictures of these?
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna post. We're gonna post. Great idea. Definitely check out our Instagram account, Stitch Tales Pod. I'm definitely gonna post. Yeah, I'm gonna see with a completely different haircut as well, because now I'm blonde. I'm usually my normal hair color is more like light brown, but because I'm turning gray, I'm blonde. But then I had like darker, shorter, also colored hair, so I look a little bit different, and also of course a lot younger. But anyways, and so I was listening to people that said that I should probably do that, start a pattern line, and hindsight is always 2020, they say. So I didn't do that, but instead I broke my wrist. so I had to stop my garment line, my fashion, and also I had to stop all my sewing blogging, and that happened in 2012. So I took a long hiatus, and then in 2015 I had decided to restart my sewing business, and then I had a pretty clear idea on what direction I wanted to go, and it was releasing sewing pattern and knits, it was doing sewing books, and I also knew that I should try a hand on doing videos as well, video tutorials. So I think my first sewing video I did in 2015, so that was around that same time. And then I released my first sewing book, Sewing Activewear, in 2017. And then after that I released 3 more books, Master the Cover Stitch Machine, Sewing Jeans, Fit for Knits, and you and I, Malena, are working on our next book as well. So that's my journey, and released Sewing Patterns during that time as well. I think I started in 2018. So as you can hear, it's been 16-year long journey for me, and just the brand name The Last Stitch to give you some context on why I sometimes feel like it's moving so slowly because it's been a lot of years and I'm still not able to sustain myself full time on this.
Yeah, and also it's a good thing to also keep in mind that how many times you have to pivot before you find this is what I'm supposed to do, this is my niche, this is what I want to do. And also that might change in a few years, because then you pivot again because things happen. And like I think everyone, like, you need to allow yourself that time also to figure it out. If you would go like, instantly like this is the end goal and you go straight there, yeah, it's a shorter journey, but you never know that in advance. I mean, when I started to study, I first thought like, yeah, seamstresses, I mean, that's what you do, but then realized, no, I don't want to sew all day, that's not, I don't want to do that. Then the designer was like, yeah, no, I'm not a designer. So it was during my 3rd or 4th year that I realized that pattern making is actually, that's a specific profession. I didn't know that when I started studying this, but I realized along the way, and I realized like, that's my cup of tea, like that's what I want to do. So it's a journey. Hopefully you never will be at the finish line, but like it's always a journey, and you have to pivot along the way and be a little bit flexible and also listen to like, what do you want to do? Like, you have the opportunity to change it again if you want to. Yeah,
that's very, very true. So you have to be very, especially when you're running a business like that, which we always talk about, it's quite time consuming and it's not always instantly rewarding. So you definitely need to find something that you can keep your passion with. And I think it's quite common, I think, that you maybe start sewing by order or doing like that, just as Malena, you began that skill and developing that and realized that was not your thing, and it's been the same for me. And I think that's quite common, that you need to find that where the stars align, basically, where you have both an interest and a skill that you can see yourself doing long term, and not be afraid to pivot. And especially if you're doing a sewing business like this, I definitely think you have to be prepared to do pivots. As for my business model in particular, as I've been I wear a lot of different hats. I mean, I see myself as a sewing media company, even if I'm just a company of one. But so I've taken a more like a wider net, in that sense that I produce lots of different forms of sewing content. I mean, books and videos and video courses, and I write a blog, and I have newsletters, and so lots of different things. Because to me that has been helpful to do that, because that also keeps my energy up, because I feel like I can switch between different tasks and I don't have to do repetitive things over and over. If I were just doing, say, sewing books, for instance, I think I would get a little bit overwhelmed. But now I do many different things in between, so it keeps my energy going to tackle those big projects.
Yeah, and you also don't put all your eggs in one basket, because who knows what the future will bring. Like, you don't know the development in the future, so maybe in 5-10 years PDF pattern as it is now will be completely gone, and everyone is using projectors or similar things. So you
or
have
AI, who knows?
Who knows? You have to pivot and evolve along with it.
Thank you. So that was a very fun questions, and it was. I hope that you didn't forget it was too long-winded here. I was trying to recap a 15-year-long sewing career.
But I think it's also so nice in Sweden. We have, everyone in school have home economics, whatever you call it, and you can also have more classes in sewing if you want to, if you're interested in it. And I think that's such a lovely skill that everyone gets to get then, because it's something that I think it's really it's good to have. Also, if you don't work with it, like just be able to sew on a button. I mean, that's pretty handy.
Yeah, it is very, very handy. You can never take away someone when you get away those skills, and when you earn those skills. And I still think it's quite common that people have a sewing machine in their homes in Sweden, even though they might not use it regularly, as you say, maybe just for simple things. It's still quite common to have some rudimentary sewing skills and tools that you need to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Great question. I think we have time for at least one more. And this is from Katie Does Sewing. And she has a really interesting question, I think, about, sewing with a challenging material, which is lightweight knit fabric. So the question is, I've had quite a few really thin, lightweight knit fabrics passed on to me, which I just cannot imagine what to do with. The only thing that comes to mind is lining, or could I double them up, and how I do that? Any other ideas? Some are really flimsy, can't even use them for toiles or sample fabrics. Yeah, Malena, tricky fabric to wear and sew, right?
yeah, it is, and usually those are like so nice looking, but it's it can be a real nightmare to work with because the seams are getting so stretched out, and it's a tricky fabric to work with, definitely. So my tip here is choose a garment model like that doesn't have so much details. The fewer seams, the better, basically, and nothing like advanced details or anything. And even a hem might be really difficult to do with this kind of fabric. So maybe like a cuff instead in shell fabric or something instead of a sewn hem with twin needle, for example. And also, it's a little bit, since I don't know exactly what kind of fabric it is, if it has a lot of drape, maybe some more drapey styles, then because that's a kind of fabric that usually, soft, thin knit has really nice drape most of the time. So drapier styles like a waterfall neckline, or I have, for example, the Betula top that has a very like asymmetric drape. Sewing wise, it's the same as sewing a t-shirt. So drapey garments are not a difficult thing to sew. And since it's not so tight fitted and close to your body, it's usually pretty good with for thinner fabric. And if it's like a little bit see-through, you can still also have like a tank top or camisole or t-shirt underneath it. But yeah, that what comes to mind for me, like a little bit more drapier, a little bit more looser garment is more suitable for it. Or depending on if it works, like maybe underneath layering garments, like a little bit more underwear feeling, if that's workable. But yeah, I know the feeling. I also have like this really super thin, super soft, very, lovely hand feel. But it's also like what to do with it. I did sew a Malva t-shirt of it, really comfortable to wear. But since it is so thin, I have it more as a under layer when I have a sweater on top, because it's a little bit too thin for my taste.
Yeah. You brought up, you gave a really good answer there, Malena. I totally agree with you. It's definitely not something that you can do more structured styles with. It has to be free flowing and
or
oversized
scarves or accessories.
Scarves, or maybe exactly, yeah. And you can use it, for instance, for lining underwear, for instance, or you can use it for if you're sewing a simple bralette or something like that. It might be fun, or as a tank top, as you say, Malena, to wear underneath. And again, also be aware that these fabrics are very difficult to keep together, basically. So, as you say, Malena, you probably need to consider maybe cuffs, for instance, to prevent them from expanding too much. Also, maybe use another fabric if you're sewing a regular t-shirt. Use a good ribbing to keep everything in place, but still be aware that it's going to be a little bit more prone, maybe, to get stretched out during sewing. Again, also you could add cuffs at the sleeves, for instance, to keep it up. And another option is, if you don't want to leave the edges raw, if you have a serger, you can use like a letter seam, or just overlock the edges using a regular overlock seam, something like that. And perhaps because otherwise, if you leave the edges raw, they might start to curl. It's because that's also curling edges is also quite a common problem with those really lightweight knits. So it's going to be hard to sew. So again, I would say having a serger is definitely very helpful. It's definitely going to make it much easier.
I
compared
think
to
it's
sewing
almost
machine,
a must, because on a regular sewing machine, it is. I think even if you have a stretch or a jersey needle, it's so easily that the fabric gets pushed down into the machine by the needle and it gets stuck. Like, I know that from experience. So a serger is almost a must for these kind of fabrics.
And if you're listening to this pod and have other suggestions as well, we're very interesting to hear that. So please share. Yeah, it's definitely one of those fabrics that you have to think twice about investing in. And of course now you got them handed down, and hopefully you will be able to find them. And you asked also around lining. I guess if you maybe line like dress or something like that, maybe you could find it could be workable, but it's not stable enough to use for some kind of lining either. So it's going to be tricky regardless what you do with it.
It's not so common to have maybe jersey lining. It obviously depends really on the garment, but I mean, it gets very easily stretched out then in contrast to the shell fabric. So it needs to be a good match with the shell fabric in that case. So it's a little tricky. I completely understand that.
And also, I mean, we always talk about this, and we also show this in our book Fit for Knits, but it's very important also to stabilize the shoulders if you're gonna sew with that type of fabric, because it has a tendency to expand as well. So you might end up with the shoulders not ending at the shoulder point, but further way down on the arms. So definitely use something like clear elastic or a strip of fabric that doesn't have the same amount of stretch, that it cut lengthwise. So that's another thing to consider to make sure that you keep the fabric in check, because it's gonna beg to grow. that's all we want to do. Some of these fabric, I swear that just by me looking at them makes them expand. Just pulling them out of the bin makes them grow, and sometimes they're not just worth the headache. I'm sorry, it's sad but true.
Scarf is then maybe a
scarf,
a big like chunky, like a lot of fabric wrap around your neck. That might be comfortable.
Sorry we couldn't be more help, but it's good to have a good reality check. There's one thing, as you say, Malena, those fabrics are so nice to feel, and you want to be like hugged by them. It's such a wonderful, and then when you start sewing, they're like, oh no, it never turns out the way you wanted to, almost never. And I mean, we're skilled with this stuff and we still say that it's tricky.
Definitely.
All right then. So thank you so much for all the questions that we got this time, and definitely keep them coming. And we didn't have time to answer all the questions, but we will definitely make another episode in the future. And I should also do a little bit of an update, because in case you missed it, when you listened to the last episode, I was waiting for the FedEx to deliver my YouTube silver play button. So I'm holding it up now if you're watching the video version.
I was trying to look in the background. I was like, no, I didn't see anything on the wall.
No, because I want to pull it up, because this is my safe space to brag a little bit. So it's like, what I'm holding in my hand now, it's similar to, I think it's about the same size as my sewing books, so you get a grasp of it. And there's a mirrored play button, and then it says presented to The Last Stitch for passing 100,000 subscribers, and then there's a YouTube logo. And as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I posted my first video in 2015, so it was an 9-year overnight success.
But it happened. You stick to it.
It happened.
It happened. Congratulations. Where are you going to place it? Is it in the background so we can see it next time?
Yeah, I probably have it because you can't see that, but I can definitely post a picture of my sewing studio so you can get an idea. But what I'm looking at above my computer and the screen is that I have a rack of all my sewing books, and also have a few of them has been translated to German and French. So I have all the books. So I think I'm gonna extend that and add the button, because I feel very I get a nice feeling of satisfaction when I look up and I'm like, wow, did I make all these books?
Your accomplishments, totally understand that.
So I'm gonna post a picture of that rack, and I'm gonna figure out a way. And it has some nice openings in the back as well, so it's gonna be easy to just put a few hooks and stuff like that, and I can pull it up. So yeah, because if you basically, I've been talking about this play button for about as long as we had this podcast, because that was one of my earliest episodes. That was my goal for 2024, and I actually managed to do it before the year was over by such a small margin. And I was initially scared also that they would stop sending out these play buttons for such a low number as 100,000 subscribers, because of course YouTube has expanded immensely since then. And luckily for me, they didn't. They did, however, make it much smaller, but at least it's still there. So I feel like I just in the nick of time. So I swear that in 5 years they will probably have removed this placket, and you know, it's going to be higher, I think. So yeah, big sigh of relief.
That is so lovely. And 100,000, that's a proper town, basically, that is following you.
Yeah,
that's great.
It is. Right. It's almost as, I think Umeå, where you live, it's a bit bigger now than 100,000. But yeah, similar numbers. A lot of typical Swedish cities is around 100,000. So thank you to the city of the world for all of you that has subscribed to my channel. And so it's very nice to have this. It's I'm really, really psyched. I thought maybe that I was feeling a little bit, I was overhyping this experience. But yeah, it felt just as good as I hoped it was.
Oh, but that's amazing. Yeah, and
yeah.
You like, it's great to have goals, something to work towards, and then always make sure to celebrate when you reach those goals, not just like, okay, so what's next. Like, no. We need to stay in the moment, be present, celebrate it, and yeah, then we can think about the next thing. But yeah, no, stay in the moment, definitely.
Yeah, that very, very much, because it's so easy to just think of the things you didn't do. And also, speaking about, you know, looking back, and for instance, my sewing career, I have this, I think it's called Trello. It's one of those planning apps, and I've had this timeline. As I began with this in 2017 or 2018, where I started to like line up projects that I wanted to do. I had like a 10-year plan, and it's so interesting because I showed a colleague of mine this, and pretty much all the things that was on my plan board, I mean, books and sewing patterns and sewing courses, have actually done. The only thing is that if I said something would be done in 2020, it was actually released in 2022. So I'm usually working like nothing was ever happening the year I said it was, but between 1 and 2 years later. But it's very nice to think, okay, I didn't do it, but eventually, you know, it all happened. And that's so rewarding to see. And now, I mean, I am 6 years or 7 years into that 10-year plan now, and it's kind of going, you know, the way I hoped. It just takes so much longer, and that was also like really rewarding to see that, you know. Yeah, things, we do move the needle, even though we sometimes don't think that we do in the moment.
Yeah, that's like so good to put it down in writing so you can see it, and then it's also like you are more prone to do it than if you have it in writing, and if you tell somebody, if you talk about it, it gives you a little bit more, other people can hold you accountable for it, if that's the thing that like drives you, like, yeah, to get things done. I always also, I love my to-do lists. I write them, then I maybe forget about them, but at least like I have written them down, put it on paper, and it's just like so nice thing also then to be able to tick things off, and it's just like declutter your headspace a little bit, like just get it down on paper, then you don't need to think about it all the time because you have it there. So yeah, love making lists.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that write lists, sometimes and I do that too, sometimes you add stuff that you already done on the list just for the satisfaction of ticking them off. And I say, keep on doing that, whatever works for you, right?
Yeah, you need to have those like Kickstarters, like, this I know I will be able to tick things, like tick it off in 1 minute, and yeah, just to get things going. Definitely do that.
All right then. Well, thank you so much for listening. And again, if you have any more questions, drop them either on our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, or our YouTube channel, Stitching Tales Pod, or at email, stitchingtalespod@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we will hear from more of us next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.